An index fund is one of the simplest ways to invest in the stock market without having to pick individual stocks. Instead of buying one company like Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, or Amazon, an index fund lets you buy a small piece of many companies at the same time. That's the basic idea. You're not trying to guess the next hot stock. You're not trying to trade every day. You're buying a fund that follows a list of investments called an index. A common example is the S&P 500, which tracks about 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the United States. So when people are saying they're investing in the S&P 500, they usually don't mean they're buying the index directly. This usually means they're buying an index fund or an ETF that tracks the S&P 500. And that's why names like VOO, SPY, IVV, FXA, IX, VTI, and other index funds show up so often when people start researching investing. This video is for education only. It's not financial advice, and it's not a recommendation to buy any specific fund. The goal is to make index funds easy to understand so you know what you're looking at before you put money into anything. Let's start with the word index. An index is basically a list. In investing, an index is a list that tracks certain parts of the market. The S&P 500 tracks large U.S. companies. The NASDAQ 100 tracks many large companies listed on the NASDAQ exchange with a heavy technology focus. A total U.S. stock market index tries to track almost the entire U.S. stock market, including large, medium, and smaller companies. There's also indexes for international stocks, bonds, real estate, dividends, small companies, specific sectors, and a lot more. But the index itself is not something you can actually buy directly. The index is the list. The index fund is the product that tries to follow that list. A simple way to think about it is this. The index is the recipe. The index fund is the meal made from the recipe. If the recipe says the fund should own certain companies in certain amounts, the fund manager tries to build that fund to match the index as closely as possible. That's what makes index funds different from actively managed funds. With an actively managed fund, a fund manager is trying to choose the investments they believe will beat the market. With an index fund, the goal is usually not to beat the market. The goal is to track the market or track a specific part of the market. That may sound boring, but boring is exactly why index funds became so popular. Some new investors get pulled into the idea that investing has to be exciting. They think they need to find the next big company before everyone else does. They think they need to watch stock prices all day. They think they need to know when to buy, when to sell, when to switch, and when to jump back in. Index funds take a different approach. Instead of trying to outsmart the market, they give you a broad exposure to the market. That means your results are tied to the performance of the group investments inside the fund. If an index fund goes up over time, the fund is designed to follow it. If the index goes down, the fund will usually go down too. Index funds are simple, but they're not magic. You can lose money. If the stock market drops, a stock index fund can drop. If you own an S&P 500 index fund and the S&P 500 has a bad year, your fund will probably have a bad year too. The benefit is not that index funds avoid risk. The benefit is that you spread your money across many different investments instead of putting everything into one company. If you buy one stock and that company has a serious problem, your entire investment depends on that one company. But if you buy a broad index fund, one company having a bad year usually doesn't destroy the whole fund because the fund owns many companies. That's called diversification. I'm sure you've heard it before. Diversification does not guarantee profits. It doesn't prevent losses, but it can reduce the risk of one bad company ruining your whole plan. Now let's talk about why index funds are usually considered low-cost investments. When a fund manager is not trying to research and pick the best stocks, that fund's going to be less expensive to run. That's why many index funds have very low expense ratios. The expense ratio is the yearly fee charged by the fund. You usually don't get a bill in the mail for it. It's taken out inside the fund. For example, if a fund has a 0.03 expense ratio, that means the annual fund cost is about 3 cents for every $100 invested. If a fund has a 1% expense ratio, that means about $1 per year for every $100 invested. That might not sound like much, but over the years, fees can matter a lot. The higher the fee, the harder the fund has to work just to give you the same result as a lower cost fund. This is one of the biggest reasons index funds became popular. A lot of investors eventually realize they can't control what the stock market does next year. They can't control whether the economy is good or bad. They can't control interest rates, elections, inflation, recessions, or which stock becomes popular next. But they can't control costs. They can control whether they choose a high fee fund or a low fee fund. They can control whether they keep things simple or make things complicated. They can control whether they invest consistently or react emotionally when the market's already moving. Now let's clear up one of the most common points of confusion. People often ask, what's the difference between an index fund and an ETF? This can be confusing because the words overlap. An index fund is a fund that tracks an index. An ETF is a type of fund that trades on the stock market like a stock. So an ETF can be an index fund. For example, An S&P 500 ETF is an ETF that tracks the S&P 500 index. There's also index mutual funds. A mutual fund doesn't trade throughout the day like an ETF. With a mutual fund, your buy or sell order usually processes after the market closes at the fund's end of day price. With an ETF, you can buy or sell during normal market hours and the price moves throughout the day. For a long-term investor, that difference may not make a huge deal. If you're buying and holding for years, the bigger questions are usually, what index does that fund track? How much does it cost? How diversified is it? Does it fit the account you're using? And does it fit your actual goal? This is why two funds can look very similar. VOO, SPY, and IVV are all well-known ETFs that track the S&P 500. FXAIX is a Fidelity mutual fund that also tracks the S&P 500. They're not identical products, but the basic idea is similar. They're all trying to follow the S&P 500. Then you have something like VTI, which is a total US stock market ETF. Instead of only tracking large companies in the S&P 500, it tries to give you exposure to the broader US stock market. That's why people often search VOO versus VTI. VOO is tied to the S&P 500. VTI is tied to the total US stock market. Both are broad US stock funds, but they're not exactly the same. One focuses on large US companies, and the other includes large companies plus smaller ones. This is also why you shouldn't pick a fund just because you saw the ticker online. A ticker symbol is just the shorthand name. Before buying anything, you want to know what the fund actually owns. Does it track the S&P 500? Does it track the total US stock market? Does it track technology stocks? Does it track international stocks? Does it track bonds? Those are very different things. A fund can be called an index fund and still be much riskier than you'd expect if the index is narrow. For example, a broad total stock market index fund is very different from a fund that only tracks one sector like technology, energy, or real estate. Both might be index funds, but one is broad, the other is concentrated. That's a major difference. For someone just starting out, the easiest way to understand index funds is put them in a few different categories. First, there's S&P 500 index funds. These track large US companies. They're popular because the S&P 500 is one of the most recognized stock market indexes in the world. Second, there's total US stock market index funds. These try to include almost the whole US stock market, not just the biggest companies. Third, there's international index funds. These give exposure to companies outside of the United States. Fourth, there's bond index funds. These are different from stock funds. Bonds are usually used for income, stability, or lowering overall portfolio swings, but they still have risks. And fifth, there's target date index funds. These are designed around an estimated retirement year. A target date fund usually owns a mix of stock and bond funds, and the mix becomes more conservative as the target year gets closer. For someone who wants extreme simplicity, target date index funds can be worth learning about, but they still need to be understood. You should know what the fund owns, how much it costs, and whether it matches your timeline. Now let's talk about how people actually make money with index funds. There are two basic ways. The first is price growth. If companies inside the fund become more valuable over time, the fund price may rise. The second is dividends or distributions. Some companies pay dividends, and those dividends can flow through the fund to investors. Depending on the account and fund settings, those dividends may be paid out as cash or reinvested to buy more shares. Reinvesting dividends can be powerful over time because it helps your investment buy more of the fund. That's part of compounding. Compounding means your money can earn returns, and over time, those returns can also earn returns. But compounding needs time. It doesn't work well if you panic every time the market drops. It doesn't work well if you keep jumping in and out. It doesn't work well if you treat long-term investing like short-term gambling. This is where a lot of people make mistakes. They hear that index funds are good long-term investments, but then they check the price every day. They buy after the market already went up, they sell after the market drops, then they buy after it recovers. That's not a plan, that's emotion. Index funds are usually best understood as long-term tools. That doesn't mean they always go up, they don't. There can be bad years, there can be crashes, there can be long periods where the market feels frustrating. But the reason people use broad index funds is because they're trying to participate in long-term market growth without needing to correctly pick every winning stock. Now let's walk through a simple example. Imagine you have $100. You could put all $100 into one company. If that company does great, you might do well. If that company does bad, your investment could get hit hard. Now imagine putting $100 into a broad index fund that owns hundreds and thousands of companies. You won't get the full benefit of a single company exploding upward, but you're also not depending entirely on one company. Your investment is spread out. That's the trade-off. Index funds are not designed to make you feel like a genius overnight. They're designed to give you broad exposure, low cost, and simplicity. For many regular investors, that combination is hard to beat. Now let's talk about the account. This is another area where people get confused. An index fund is the investment. The account is where the investment lives. A brokerage account is one type of account. A Roth IRA is another type of account. A traditional IRA is another. A 401k is another. You can think of the account like a container. The index fund is what you put inside the container. For example, someone might open a Roth IRA and buy an S&P 500 index fund inside that Roth IRA. Or someone might open a regular taxable brokerage account and buy a total market ETF inside that account. The fund and the account are not the same thing. This matters because different accounts have different tax rules. A retirement account may have contribution limits and withdrawal rules. A taxable brokerage account may be more flexible, but taxes can apply when you sell investments or receive dividends. That doesn't mean one account is automatically right for everyone. It means you need to understand where you're buying the fund, not just which fund you're buying. Now, how much money do you need to start? This depends on the brokerage and the fund. Some mutual funds have minimum investment requirements and some have no minimum. Many ETFs can be bought with the price of one share. And many apps and brokerages now offer fractional shares, which means you're able to invest with a smaller dollar amount instead of buying a full share. That's why the price of one share can confuse people. If an ETF costs $500 per share, that doesn't always mean you need to invest $500 to get started. If your brokerage offers fractional shares, you may be able to invest $5, $10, $25, or whatever amount the platform allows. The more important question is not only can I start, the better question is can I invest consistently without needing the money immediately? Money needed for rent, food, bills, emergency savings, or short-term goals probably shouldn't be thrown into a stock index fund just because the internet says investing is important. Stock index funds can go down. If you need the money soon, a market drop can create a problem. Time horizon matters. If the money's for something next month, next semester, or maybe even next year, a stock index fund may be too risky. If the money's for long-term wealth building or retirement, then broad index funds start to make a lot more sense. Now let's cover a common question. Is an S&P 500 index fund enough? The honest answer is it depends. An S&P 500 fund gives you exposure to large U.S. companies. That's already a lot of diversification compared to buying one stock. But it's not the entire world. It doesn't include every U.S. company. It doesn't include international stocks. It doesn't include bonds. Some investors use the S&P 500 fund as their core holding. Some prefer a total U.S. stock market fund. Some add international funds. Some add bond funds. Some use a target date fund and let that fund handle the mix. The key is understanding the role of each fund. Don't just collect random funds because the names sound familiar. Owning 5 funds doesn't automatically mean you're more diversified. You might own 5 funds that all hold many of the same companies. For example, if you own multiple S&P 500 funds, you may not be adding much diversification. You may just be buying the same type of exposure in different wrappers. That's why the overlap matters. Before buying several funds, check what they actually own. A simple portfolio can be better than a messy portfolio. Here's 3 simple portfolio ideas that people often research. This isn't a recommendation, it's just a way to understand the concepts. The first is a one fund approach. That might be a target date index fund or a broad total market fund, depending on the person's goal and risk tolerance. The point is simplicity. The second is a 2-fund approach. That might be a stock index fund and a 1 bond index fund. The stock fund is for growth, the bond fund is for stability. The third is a 3-fund approach. That usually means US stocks, international stocks, and bonds. Again, this isn't telling you what to buy, it's just showing you how investors think about building blocks. The big idea is that each fund should have a job. If a fund doesn't have a clear job in your plan, you may not need it. Now let's talk about what to check before buying an index fund. First, check the index. What is the fund tracking? Second, check the expense ratio. How much does the fund cost each year? Third, check the holdings. What does the fund actually own? Fourth, check whether it's an ETF or a mutual fund. Do you want something that trades during the day or something that processes after the market closes? Fifth, check the account type. Are you buying it in a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, 401k, or taxable brokerage account? Sixth, check the risk. How much could this fund drop during a bad market? And seventh, check your own timeline. When do you need the money? The last question might be the most important. A good investment can still be wrong for the wrong timeline. Now let's go through a simple buying process without using any specific app. Step 1, choose the account. That might be a brokerage account, Roth IRA, traditional IRA, or workplace retirement plan. Step 2, deposit money. Step 3, search for the fund by name or ticker symbol. Step 4, read the fund page. Don't just hit buy. Look at the index, expense ratio, holdings, performance history, and risk information. Step 5. Choose the amount. This could be a dollar amount if fractional investing is available, or a share amount if you're buying the whole share. Step 6. Review the order. Make sure the ticker is correct. Make sure the account is correct, and make sure the amount is correct. Step 7. Decide whether it's a one-time investment or part of a recurring plan. For long-term investors, consistency can matter more than trying to pick the perfect day. A lot of people wait because they want the perfect entry point. The problem is nobody knows the perfect entry point in advance. That's why some investors use dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging means investing a set amount on a regular schedule. For example, someone might invest every week, every 2 weeks, or every month. When prices are high, the amount buys fewer shares. When prices are low, the amount buys more shares. Dollar cost averaging doesn't guarantee profits, it doesn't protect you from losses, but it can help remove some of the emotion from the process. Now let's talk about the biggest mistakes to avoid. Mistake number 1 is thinking index funds can't lose money. They can. If the market drops, the fund can drop. Mistake number 2 is confusing low cost with no risk. A cheap fund can still be risky if it tracks a risky index. Mistake number 3 is buying too many overlapping funds. More funds don't always mean better diversification. Mistake number 4 is chasing last year's performance. Just because a fund did well recently doesn't mean it's going to do the same thing next year. Mistake number 5 is ignoring fees. Small fees can become meaningful over a long time. Mistake number 6 is investing money you need soon. Long-term investing works best with long-term money. Mistake number 7 is panic selling. Selling during a market drop can turn a temporary decline into a permanent loss. Mistake number 8 is not reading into the fund details. Before buying any fund, know what it tracks, know what it owns, know what it costs, and what risks come along with it. Now let's bring it all together. An index fund is a fund that tracks an index. The index is the list. The fund is the investment product that follows the list. Index funds can be ETFs or mutual funds. They're popular because they can offer broad diversification, low cost, and a simple way to invest without picking individual stocks. But they're not risk-free. They can go down. They can underperform the index because of fees, tracking errors, or other costs. And not every index fund is broad or conservative. Some are very concentrated. So the goal is not to buy something just because it says index fund. The goal is to understand what you're buying. For many people, index funds are the first moment when investing starts to feel less confusing. You don't have to know every company. You don't have to predict every market move. You don't have to build a portfolio one stock at a time. You can start by understanding the market, the fund, the cost, the risk, and the account. That's the foundation. Once that makes sense, investing becomes much less intimidating. And from there, you can make better decisions instead of guessing. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.